Hello, my friends. Tiffany Carroll here, and welcome to the Know Your Creator Type series. I thought it was very interesting and completely synchronistic that we're starting off with the improviser, and that I went on to check my tech and realized that I can't live stream on YouTube yet. Apparently, there's a process that I have to go through for it to be available to me. So that act of experiencing something that wasn't what I had planned, and then getting creative with how to deal with it, that is the zone of genius of the improviser, particularly when one can bring in delight and play and humor, laugh at it instead of like, oh my God, it's the end of the world. So I want to name that at the onset. This is part of the flavor of the improviser, is like, you're going along, you think something's going to happen a certain way. It doesn't. What do you do about it? The improviser embraces this idea of surprise. And now what are we going to do? Surprise. Now that's a developed improviser. And I'll get into that in this first video. Okay. Before we dive into the details, I want to lay down a little bit of context. I want for you to watch the introductory video for this series if you haven't already. And in fact, I would invite you to pause this and go and watch that one. It's short, and then come back to this, because there's rich context for understanding how all of these, basically an overview of these, and why you should even care to stay tuned with me on this video journey. The improviser is one of the 5 types. Everybody has all 5 types inside of them, although we each have 1 or 2 types that are our particular zone and are reflective of our theme, our soul theme in this life. And it's important to get to know each one of the 5 creator types and where you excel and where you are challenged, so that you can interface with yourself in a much more empowering and flowing way. So rather than going, oh, I'm not creating and producing like this person, or like all of these people that this particular culture seems to amplify, I need to try to be like them or do it like them. No, you need to do it like you. And once you know that there's different ways to do it, to create, and that you have full permissions to gravitate towards the one that really lights you up, that's when you can bring your authenticity to whatever it is that you're creating. I would even go so far as to say that the authenticity of self cannot fully flow through in the creative process unless you do give yourself permissions to create in the way that feels really good to you, really good. Okay, so with that as context, we're going to spend 2 to 3 weeks on each type. So I'm going to start here with an overview, and we're going to go into some more details next week. And I will probably, I'll also be weaving in certain essential oils and even acupoints for each of the creator types. That will probably be next week. So shall we? Okay. The improviser. The improviser correlates to the element fire in Chinese medicine, and the element fire corresponds to summertime. So for me right now, I'm actually in the Mediterranean. I'm in Sardinia, and it's definitely the height of summertime. It's warm. I was at the beach today. I left my swimsuit on for us. I have red shoes on. This is the nature of fire element. It's about intimacy, heat, the 2 space. In fact, in numerology, the number that's associated with the improviser is 2, the number 2. Heart boundaries, betrayal, truth and deceit, presence with a capital P, and propriety, which I'll break down as we go further. Rhythm and timing of the heart, and emergent presence. So these are the themes of fire element and of the improviser. One of the hallmarks of the improviser is that when they are themselves in their zone of genius, if you will, Others feel like they're the only person in the room with that person. When you read a written piece from an improviser or look at some piece of art from an improviser, there's a deeply intimate sensation or experience that goes along with it. I have a lot of improviser energy. And so when you are engaging with me in this video, like right now, you probably feel a strong presence from me. So I know it's not the same as being face to face, being on video, but with improvisers that have practiced and honed their ability to presence, you really feel like I feel that I am right there with you. In fact, when I'm facilitating, I feel right there with the people that I'm facilitating with, even if they aren't in front of me. This is part of how the improviser works, because their zone is the heart zone, fire element, and the two space. The improvisers, sometimes I might call them the fire people, but the improvisers also have a way, when they're in balance, of making you feel, or you having an experience of feeling loved. It's not as much about being cared for. We're going to get into that with the chef type, but it's like being loved, this radical presence, this love, this willingness to risk in intimacy for another. That's part of the magic of the improviser. The zone of intimacy, which is directly connected to the zone of emergent truth and authenticity. And can you feel even right now with me, like I'm giving myself over to presencing, which means that I don't already get to know the next thing that I'm going to say. I mean, I have my notes, but I'm not thinking about the next thing that I'm going to say. I'm not thinking about anything. I am presencing with you. Good. What I just practiced right there, when I stopped for a moment, and if you've done work with me in the past, you'll also sometimes see me just close my eyes and stop. That is a technique that I've developed to balance my improviser energy, which tends to go up, to balance it and drop down, which is connecting to the alchemist. And we will talk about how the alchemist can balance the improviser either today or next week. Okay, so let's get into, I want to talk about what's important for you to embrace as an improviser, or if you're wanting to develop your improviser abilities, this is important for you to embrace. Because your medicine, with a capital M, if you will, your healing balm, your energy of service in this life is presence itself, the power of presence, the power of heart. Then that means that in order to be a beacon, and we could even say a channel for that in through creative acts, you have to be embracing intimacy self to self. When you are embracing intimacy self to self, transparency to self, then you can actually transmit presence in the way that the improviser, it's like the keystone. It is the grounding centerpiece for the improviser to be able to presence. And from the presencing place, they can do all kinds of stuff. There can be all kinds of surprises. They can respond in all kinds of ways. They can delight you and tickle you in all kinds of ways. But that center fulcrum, if you will, is the capacity to presence because of intimacy with self. Okay? So if you do not practice intimacy with self, if you do not develop your I'll leave it at that. If you don't practice intimacy with self and practice presencing with yourself and others, then you will, now I'm going to give you a list of things. This is when the improviser is off. You will feel and are potentially perceived as scattered, ungrounded, timing a little off, or a lot off for that matter. Controlling. This is a big one that improvisers tend to go in when they're off, is that they micromanage and they control. Anxious, which is often connected to the control. Lack of warmth, or the opposite, like almost too much warmth. I was going to use the word seductive, but it's not quite right. It's like, and it's not quite like smothering, but it's when somebody's sort of turning on the warmth too much and it feels like, it doesn't actually feel appropriate or authentic. It feels like they're trying, because it's connected to a manipulation. Because when improvisers are off, they're attempting to get intimacy through maladaptive pathways instead of actually presencing with themselves and others. Is that cool? Okay, another one would be is not present, lack of presence, and fear of not being loved. And this, I find that often improvisers won't be conscious of that fear, although I know in my own experience, how it would show up for me was that I would constantly be kind of gauging the temperature of the room by like face reading people and seeing how they were perceiving me as I was teaching or delivering a seminar. And if I thought I saw a glance that didn't look favorable or that they weren't happy with me, I would alter how I was, because I wanted to get to feel that perception of being loved and loved and accepted, basically. So as the improviser develops in presencing with themselves, and they get really good at not abandoning themselves, even in the face of perhaps disapproval, or even in the face of judgment, that's how an improviser can keep authentically creating, even when these things arise, because they do. Okay, so what an improviser needs. This is what an improviser needs. You need permissions to be spontaneous. You being spontaneous and playful is not a problem. Even if you're creating something serious or facilitating something very serious, it's still important for you to be able to embrace spontaneity, novelty, laughter, surprise, all of these things. Lead with adventure. The improvisers need opportunity to improvise. And when we're leading an adventurous life, or when we're creating in an adventurous way, that's like fuel for the improviser. So for improvisers, it's less important for them to have rigid, structured time for painting or creating or writing. And it's better that they have full permissions for joyful adventure, knowing that they're committed to the vision of what wants to flow through them, and doing that in the state of unfolding adventure. For example, for me, when I create, I'm always traveling with my little iPhone thing I can hold in a clamp light. I've got my notepad and I've got a pen, and when stuff flows through me, whenever it does, I can document it, or I can record an impromptu audio or an impromptu video. That way of creating for, say, for example, for the priestess, it doesn't go over very well. And we'll talk about it when we get there. So this is definitely unique to the improviser, the need for adventure and spontaneity. Embrace of the child spirit. This is really important for the improviser. The child spirit is the source of spontaneity and novelty. It is the source of innocence and the root of magic. If an improviser creator type has not embraced the child spirit, it will be evident in their creations. They won't be as authentic, or the authenticity won't permeate through the entirety of the creation. They need centering and or mindfulness practice, a centering or mindfulness practice, to create in joy and delight. Improvisers have to create in joy and delight. That's a prereq. to embrace surprises, humor, and laughter, to have intimacy practices. And it's important for the improviser to embrace the alchemist for balance. And so we'll talk about that when we get to the alchemist. It's important for the improviser to, if they are creating, let's see how to say this. For the improviser, they need structure like all the creator types, but too much structure actually really dampens the vitality of the improviser. So the improviser has to find that nice balance for them. What I found in the improviser creator types that I work with, who are bringing forth their creations in the world, including the next version of themselves, what I encourage them to do is commit to containers versus details. So if you're a painter, it could look like you have the container of this canvas and of these paint colors and of perhaps this time frame. Those could be the containers. But beyond that, don't get too focused on the details, because the improviser has to improvise as they're letting it flow through. If you're a dancer, you could imagine the container of the room, the container of the song, but then you're free moving with it. If you're a facilitator or a teacher or a coach, naming and creating the parameters of your container, but not getting focused on the particular details of all the things that you're going to bring to the container, because you need permissions to improvise and pull on whatever tools you have to offer that are going to be needed in any particular moment. And you, by the way, if you're an improviser, as you develop in trusting that. Trusting your ability to improvise in integrity and in honoring and cultivating of presence. That's your gift. Okay, so this is fabulous kickoff. Share this with others. Next week, and we should be able to live stream next week, I'm going to be talking specifically about oils, essential oils, to support the improviser in their development or when they get stuck. And then I'm also going to go into detail about a few different practices that are really supportive for the improviser type on creative path. Now, this may have resonated with you. Maybe you think, yeah, I'm an improviser totally all the way, or kind of, but of course you haven't heard the rest of them, so you don't totally know. What I would encourage you to do is just feel whatever it is that you felt that came up with this. Like maybe, yeah, I want to learn how to do that more, or that sounds like some of the ways that I stunt my creativity. Great. So then practice some of the practices that I talked about today. Practice presencing. Practice intimacy with self. What does that look like and feel like for you? And practice with permissions to be spontaneous, to embrace these little glitchy things that come up, like this with this live stream. I could have made a big problem out of. Actually, in the past, I totally would have. I would have felt embarrassed and ashamed, and I would have made a big problem out of it, and I would have completely panicked. But because I have developed myself as an improviser through accepting and embracing that truth of how I operate, now I don't see the problem. It's like, oh, now it's like, this is my zone to practice and play in. So remember I said that you have all 5 creator types in you. So it behooves us to do a little practice and refinement with each one as we go through each one. Okay? I'm so excited to be on this journey with you. I'll see you next week. Do share, and thank you from my heart to yours.